Réutiliser l'espace, monsieur le président.
Still some seats at the front. You want to join? Good morning, everyone. Welcome, friends, colleagues, and partners, to this very important event with a very special welcome to the First Lady from Botswana. Thank you very much for coming. My name's Jocelyn Maralta. I'm Vice Chair of the Board of the Global Fund, but I think I got roped into this as a former First Lady as well. When Winnie Byanyima and John Nkengasong asked me to moderate this event the morning after Global Fund replenishment, I thought we'd all be too exhausted. But that's the magic of leadership and HIV. It makes us get up every morning to save more lives, empower more communities, and keep fighting to end inequalities. This morning, it's brought so many ministers and partners from around the world, across Africa together for the week's only high-level side event during UNGA on HIV. Thank you all for coming. I'll start by asking Ambassador Nkengasong, the new US Global AIDS Coordinator and Special Representative for Global Health Diplomacy, to deliver some words of welcome, followed by our other co-host, Winnie Byanyima, Executive Director of UNAIDS. But before that, I'd like to thank President Biden and the US government for hosting the Global Fund replenishment. We witnessed outstanding leadership with the US and many of our partners, including countries represented here today, Rwanda, South Africa, many others, who stepped up with pledges for the Global Fund. As Robert Kennedy once said, few will have the greatness to bend history, but each of us can change a small portion of events, and in some of those acts will be written the history of this generation. Together, we raised a sum of more than $14.25 billion so far for the partnership's work over the next 3 years, and we have many more big pledges to come. Together, we started to bend progress back towards eliminating the 3 diseases by 2030. Today, we'll discuss the political leadership and actions, large and small, that will get us there. We have some great leaders, ministers leading the fight in their countries, and partners pushing the boundaries of the possible. We'll start with the dynamic duo, Ambassador Nkengasong, and then with Winnie. So, John, over to you.
Thank you.
I think you just talk.
Thank you.
Is it on?
Yeah, it works. Thank you, Lady Ross, for the introductory remarks. As for those of you who were at the previous session, the breakfast session, I started off by saying what Lady Ross just said the morning after, and we continue to say it a lot because yesterday was a huge event, the day we were all waiting for, and would never stop congratulating the Global Fund. Peter, congratulations for a very successful replenishment. And of course, for the great political leadership exercised by President Biden and his administration for making this happen. We always wanted the headline news the day after to be that the world re-energized, comes together to recommit to the fight against HIV/AIDS. PEPFAR and the Global Fund have argued in the past, continue to argue, represents the best of humanity when we apply our minds appropriately in solving the right problems, social problems. Someone said the other day that PEPFAR saves about 1 million lives a year. Global Fund, we all have seen the statistics, has saved a cumulative number of close to 50 million lives. So let me, before I go into the core of my remarks, acknowledge the ministers that are here on the panel and those in the room. I see a lot of them. And the leaders that from the countries that we partner with. I see my friend Olive Sisana out there. I see so many of you in the room. But let me also very uniquely take the time off to acknowledge the presence of Ambassador Eric Gosby. It is on the shoulder of such giants like Eric, Ambassador Mark Daibo, Ambassador David Bex, that I stand happily today to continue the fight and the charger, which they have all rallied behind me. I'm very pleased that today is my 100th day on the job. So before you start saying, what has he done? I mean, this guy, he's been there forever and he's not done anything, whatever. So if you turn to Eric, Debbie, and Mark and say, well, if they have done their job, I would not be here. So please always. So really, PEPFAR is at a turning point in the history of this struggle. And it is time that we reimagine our strategic direction. Where do we go from here? Recognizing the gains that we've made over the years, tremendous gains. When PEPFAR and Global Fund and other programs were started 20 years ago, I want all of us to reflect the meeting we had in Durban. The despair, the fear that we all had in Durban about what was going to happen, the inequities that existed. Antiretroviral therapy was available and had shaped the trajectory of the outcome of HIV infection by 1996. But in developing countries, especially Africa, we continue to see that increase. It is only until 2005 that the curve started bending. And we've made remarkable progress, but we still have remarkable challenges going forward. It's time to pose and ask the question, where do we go from here? And that is exactly what PEPFAR is trying to do, will try to do. There are 5 pillars that I will leave you with that after listening to all of you, we all said, it seems we are hearing 5 things. One is that there must be priority populations that we are looking at: children, adolescent girls, and young women, and key populations. That we have to identify those gaps and narrow the gaps. Second is that we have to sustain the response. That the last mile might be as challenging as the journey we've walked. So sustaining the response means working more effectively with countries, listening to each other respectfully, with humility, that we may know what we know, but there's a lot that we don't know. That HIV response has defined global health for the last 25 years, but that the emerging infections, i.e. Ebola, COVID, and others, are now challenging us to effectively fight HIV/AIDS. So we have to elevate the platforms that we have developed for PEPFAR and position them such that they can be more effective in responding to disruptive pandemics. That effective partnerships across the board are very important. They have to transform the way we fight HIV/AIDS, but very importantly, we must do this with science. It must lead with science. There are 3 pillars, 3 enablers that we thought are very important. One, continue to lead with data. We've seen the power of data. When we apply data effectively, we know where that infection is. And it is only through such efforts, like using data to drive programming, that we're able to expose the gaps that exist in the inequities in children. We know that about 41% of children are not suppressing their viremia. It's only through data programming. We have to take some risks, minimal risks, what I call model a risk, and say we must innovate in the way we deliver products and in new products. And community leadership is so important. So that's the direction that we today are presenting after a series of extensive consultation with you, with humility and politeness, knowing that what is in this, the 5 pillars and the 3 enablers, may not capture everything, but it reflects what we heard from all of you going forward. So I look forward to a very comprehensive conversation this morning.
Thank you very much, John. And now I have the honor to introduce our other co-host, Winnie Byanyima, Executive Director of UNAIDS. We all know Winnie. She's a passionate and long-standing champion of social justice and gender equality. As head of UNAIDS, Winnie leads the UN efforts to end the AIDS epidemic by 2030. Winnie.
Thank you, Lady Ross. Good afternoon, friends. I'd like, of course, first to recognize my sister, Her Excellency Neo Masisi, First Lady of Botswana. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Honorable ministers from Botswana, Cote d'Ivoire, DRC, Eswatini, Malawi, Rwanda, South Africa. I hope I haven't left out anyone. Thank you for finding time to be with us in this very busy week. My friends and colleagues, Ambassador John Kengasong, Peter Sands, GD, and amazing Lois from Botswana, all of you, thank you for being here. Yesterday, we celebrated the Global Fund making history with record funding mobilized to end AIDS, TB, and malaria. Congratulations, Lady Rose and Peter Sands and your teams. We also have a new strategic direction from PEPFAR. You've just heard Ambassador John Kengasong summarizing it. I salute you, Ambassador Kengasong. You are translating that unwavering commitment of the Biden administration and the US Congress, bipartisan support there, into more strategic, more targeted support to countries and communities. And then last year, here in New York, member states adopted a bold new political declaration on HIV/AIDS, setting a new direction again, explicitly focusing on ending the inequalities that drive the new infections and deaths. Today, we will explore how we transform these milestones, these big achievements in strategic direction, in raising funds, into a momentum, a strong momentum to end AIDS. That's why we're here today. I'm from movements. I love movements. As I look around this room, I see the movement to end AIDS. I see powerful leaders from government. I see leaders from intergovernmental bodies like myself and Chidi and others. I see civil society. I see people delivering service on the ground like Lois in Botswana, in Zimbabwe. I see us all here, and this should be an exciting conversation about how do we generate that momentum for the last push to end AIDS by 2030. How will we get every child who's living with HIV on treatment? How will we get viral suppression for all people living with HIV in Africa? How will we keep our girls in school and turn the tide on 4,000 new infections amongst our girls and young women in Africa every week? How will we remove those punitive and discriminatory laws that block so many of our young people, especially from accessing prevention and treatment services? How will we get new science, like the long-acting injectables, into the arms of those who need it for prevention or for treatment? How will we get that science to reach our people? So how are we going to get this done? The resources, the delivery on the ground across Africa, focus how to do this in the midst of all these crises of climate, of droughts, of war, of fiscal constraints. How we're going to do it is the subject of our conversation. So Lady Rose, I pass it back to you to lead us in this discussion. I'm excited to hear what each of you or most of you will have to say about how we'll build that momentum and get there 2030, ending AIDS as a public health threat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Winnie. So we'll move straight into our first panel discussion, where we'll discuss political and country leadership in the fight to end HIV/AIDS. We have the pleasure of starting the conversation with three ministers of health from Africa: Dr. Jean-Jacques Mbungani from DRC, Monsieur Pierre Dimba from Côte d'Ivoire, and Dr. Daniel Ngamaje from Rwanda. Joining them is Lois Maturo from GFAN Zimbabwe, and also Dr. Moeti, WHO Regional Director for Africa. I hope the panel will be fast, interactive, and provocative. I'll ask the questions in English, but some of our panelists may prefer to respond in French. If any panelist or anyone in the audience needs interpretation, please use your smartphone and open the link to Zoom, and you can use your headphone to listen to the language track you prefer. If you need help, find the UNAIDS staff over there. Thank you. Minister Mbungani, my first question is to you. In a country as large and complex as DRC, how are you sustaining the HIV response? With so many challenges, DRC is still making impressive progress. How are you maintaining high-level leadership, visibility of HIV, and a sense of urgency?
Merci. Je vais m'exprimer en français, comme cela a été dit. J'espère que je me fais comprendre. D'abord, je tiens à remercier tous les organisateurs de la réunion de ce jour, à vos titres respectifs. Notre pays, la République démocratique du Congo, a dans son programme de gouvernement retenu deux axes importants. No translate? It's okay? Yes.
Yeah,
Le point le plus important, c'est la mise en œuvre de la couverture santé universelle, ce qui est vraiment été retenu dans notre programme de gouvernement. Et également, la manière efficace pour lutter contre les épidémies et les endémies. En ce qui nous concerne, là maintenant, par rapport à la 7e reconstitution, comme cela a été dit, d'abord je tiens à féliciter tous les États, tous les donateurs, à différents degrés, les pays qui ont donné ce qu'ils pouvaient par rapport à leur économie nationale et ceux qui ont donné beaucoup pour arriver à atteindre ce que nous attendons pour lutter efficacement contre les 3 maladies. En République démocratique du Congo, nous avons renforcé la riposte contre le VIH-Sida à travers le pays, malgré le contexte difficile de plusieurs épidémies. Vous devez savoir que notre pays est une niche écologique à plusieurs épidémies. Nous parlons de la COVID-19, nous sommes à la 4e vague, nous avons Ebola, nous sommes à la 15e épidémie, on a le monkeypox qui sévit à travers le pays, la rougeole qui tue beaucoup, il faut le dire, il y a le choléra. Malgré tout cela, le gouvernement a inscrit la lutte contre le sida parmi les priorités nationales, cet engagement s'est traduit par la mobilisation des ressources domestiques. On a fait un gros effort au niveau national. Le budget national est passé en un an de 10 milliards à un peu moins de 15 milliards pour la République démocratique du Congo, et la part allouée à la santé est passée de 10% à 14%. Donc il y a une détermination d'augmenter le budget par rapport au système de santé et aider efficacement les populations. Également, il y a un renforcement de programmes de prévention, soins et traitement du VIH qui se produit à travers tout le pays. Et cela est vraiment manifeste, avec des conséquences, comme je peux le dire, de 2002 à 2020, nous avons réduit de 43% les décès liés au VIH-Sida. La RDC est engagée également dans l'Alliance globale sur le VIH pédiatrique. Pour rappel, 2 enfants VIH sur 3 n'ont pas accès au traitement. L'objectif de mon pays, à l'instar d'autres pays, est d'éliminer le VIH en 2030. Pour atteindre ces objectifs, nous avons lancé des initiatives telles que j'ai dit au début, la couverture santé universelle, l'accès aux soins de santé à tous de manière égalitaire sans que cela impacte sur les finances des ménages. Nous venons d'élancer des différents projets de construction parce que lutter contre les 3 maladies, pour nous, c'est également augmenter le système de santé. Nous allons construire dans les 145 territoires un peu moins de 800 centres de santé, 800 centres de santé plutôt, pour aider le pays, et 1000 centres de santé communautaires en 5 ans. Voilà, en quelques mots, les stratégies du pays et l'engagement du gouvernement pour d'abord renforcer le système de santé, en ce y compris la lutte efficace contre le VIH-Sida. Je vous remercie.
Minister, thank you. Very impressive results, particularly the increase in domestic resources to overall and to health. A follow-up question to Dr. Moeti. With so many competing health and other priorities, as the Minister has just pointed out, how do we get governments to pick up the pace to end AIDS?
Thank you very much. And I'd just like to add our voice to thanking John and Winnie for convening us. And I'd like to say a special hello to my First Lady who has graced this meeting, the First Lady of Botswana, and greet all the leaders who are here in this room. I think it's a fantastic convening of people who play a key role in HIV/AIDS in the region. So that's, and Peter, congratulations for yesterday for that achievement. I know that we're there to back your investment with the technical work that WHO can provide on the ground in the countries. How do we get countries to focus on this, recovering from COVID-19, from the attempts to eradicate polio with the return of wild polio virus to the region, and the many outbreaks that are happening at the same time on the continent? I've just come from a polio event, in fact, early this morning, where we were talking about transitioning while we continue to work to eradicate polio. And it has a lot of similarities to the work on HIV, because we've had a special focus on polio, but we recognize that we also need to work through our health systems to address multiple problems while keeping the focus very much on progressing with polio until we eradicate it. I think with HIV, we've learned certain lessons. John was referring earlier to the issue of inequity, which continues to be a major factor in driving vulnerability, not only to transmission of the infection, but also in terms of access to services for HIV. So I think we need to put that squarely at the center of what we do. And if you look at inequity, vulnerability, lack of access to services, and the role that governments have to play, we see that it is in really similar circumstances. So if we try to find the commonalities of who's most vulnerable, where are the greatest gaps and inequities, we can find commonalities between access to vaccination services for children, access to family planning for women, access to services for adolescents, and HIV services. So I believe what we need to do really is to look not only at addressing key populations and the most vulnerable groups through multi-sectoral approaches, but see how we can leverage what exists in the health systems and our understanding now of inequities, the most vulnerable, and go and focus on those groups. We had a very interesting discussion at the World Health Assembly, and our director, Meg, is here on looking at how to work on risks and access to services for HIV, for hepatitis, so for connected diseases. So making those connections, because again, the vulnerabilities, the risk factors are the same, in my view, is one way in which we can leverage the resources that are available. I mean, the famous discussion that we have about how to make health systems work in an integrated way to address multiple problems. And I believe we can make the resources go further and achieve results for HIV. I do think that the progress that's been made in HIV, for example, we put some effort into supporting West African countries, West and Central African countries to catch up as WHO a few years ago. We actually have seen access to antiretroviral therapy with this emphasis on West and Central African countries accelerate much better than we're doing in the better off, I would say, East and Southern African countries. I believe if we pull all of this together, but the most important issue for ministers and governments is to find the commonalities, to find the people together. We've had a very exciting discussion in WHO with one minister, the Minister of Health of Sierra Leone, who is shifting his work to a person-centered approach. Because I believe if we do that, we can look at what are the health risks and vulnerabilities of a person at a certain phase in life. And again, look at the resources that are available, the attention that we play across the board, and combine them so that we define the intervention for preventing mother-to-child transmission, access to vaccine, to immunization services for a young child, and what to do with adolescent young women and girls, working with other sectors, of course, to address their vulnerability. So if there's one thing I can plug for, it is to look at inequities, look at integrating our approaches around people, and that would enable ministers of health, I believe, to have a more workable way of working across a range of diseases, including pandemic preparedness and response. Thank you.
Dr. Moeti, your excellent answer provides the perfect framework for my next question to the Minister of Health from Côte d'Ivoire. Minister, during COVID, what did you learn about the strengths and gaps of your own capabilities in the health sector? And how are you now applying this knowledge to strengthen your HIV response and enhance pandemic preparedness in Côte d'Ivoire?
Je voudrais remercier les organisateurs de cette belle rencontre ce matin, notamment le PEPFAR, l'ONU-SIDA, et vraiment faire remarquer la mobilisation internationale autour de la question de la santé, mais surtout du VIH-SIDA, qui nous permet d'espérer que à l'horizon de 2030, nous pourrons atteindre nos objectifs d'éradication de ces maladies. Oui, la Côte d'Ivoire, comme tous les autres pays, a été secouée par la pandémie à Covid-19 depuis donc, le 1er mars 2020, où nous avons connu notre premier cas. Et ça n'a pas été facile puisque nous n'étions pas préparés. Le système, en tout cas, n'était pas préparé, y compris le personnel, donc à faire face à cette pandémie. Mais très rapidement, je pense que sous le leadership du chef de l'État et l'ensemble des membres du gouvernement, un comité donc a été mis en place et puis présidé par le président pour mobiliser toutes les forces vives, y compris la société civile, pour mettre en place le plan de riposte qui a intégré l'ensemble des partenaires nationaux et internationaux, mais également toutes les couches de la population. Nous avons commencé d'abord par prendre des mesures pour circonscrire la maladie au niveau d'Abidjan, où elle a démarré, pour ne pas qu'elle se propage sur l'ensemble du territoire. Mais nous avons surtout renforcé la sensibilisation, y compris la sensibilisation de proximité avec les religieux, les préfets qui sont donc dans les différentes régions, mais également donc les différentes couches des populations. Et cela a donné donc l'effet donc de concentrer 95% des cas dans la capitale Abidjan et très peu de cas donc à l'intérieur du pays. Le plan qui a été mis en place a permis donc également d'investir rapidement. Donc le gouvernement a mobilisé des ressources aussi bien au niveau national qu'international sur son budget avec la participation des partenaires pour faire des investissements, pour faire non seulement des dépistages, mais mettre en quarantaine donc les cas contacts, et un système donc de digitalisation a été mis en place pour retracer les cas contacts. Ça a permis d'être efficace. Aujourd'hui, donc je pense que la Côte d'Ivoire a moins de 800 personnes décédées donc de Covid. On a donc aujourd'hui les taux de positivité les plus faibles. Et aujourd'hui, nous sommes en train donc d'aller vers plus de 9 millions de personnes complètement vaccinées. L'objectif étant donc d'atteindre en fin d'année la totalité donc des populations cibles que nous devons vacciner. Mais je pense que cette maladie nous a permis d'abord de comprendre que investir dans la santé était vraiment offrait la meilleure rentabilité économique dans notre pays. Parce que pendant la survenue de cette maladie, un pays agricole avec le port principal à Abidjan, l'économie était complètement donc paralysée puisque les produits agricoles ne pouvaient plus venir au port. La ville était donc isolée du reste de la Côte d'Ivoire. Les services étaient interrompus et ça a donc dégradé donc notre croissance, la croissance du pays qui était soutenue depuis 2010. Donc, ces mesures qui ont été prises ont permis en une année, en 2021, donc de reprendre la marche vers la croissance. Et les investissements qui ont été réalisés ont permis non seulement donc de renforcer notre système sanitaire, puisque nous avons mis en place aussi bien donc des centres de dépistage, donc renforcer les labos, renforcer la capacité donc de nos équipes à intervenir rapidement, donc mais également des primes ont été données au personnel de santé donc qui sont de plus en plus motivés, et je pense que cela se ressent aujourd'hui dans la prestation donc de nos professionnels de santé. Parallèlement à cela, la Côte d'Ivoire donc a renforcé son système sanitaire par un investissement important de plus de 1000 milliards de francs CFA, et qui permet donc dans tous les districts sanitaires donc de renforcer les plateaux techniques, de les équiper, mais également de recruter davantage de personnel de santé pour que nous puissions intégrer donc la lutte contre la Covid en routine dans notre pays. Alors concernant le VIH/SIDA, je pense que la Côte d'Ivoire a fait des progrès ces dernières années, depuis 2010, grâce à la collaboration donc des principaux partenaires que j'ai cités tout à l'heure, l'UNAIDS, le Fonds mondial, le PEPFAR, qui contribuent aux côtés de l'État donc à financer ce secteur. Pour vous donner quelques chiffres, nous sommes passés donc de 2010 de 4,7% de taux de prévalence à 1,9% à ce jour, et les nouvelles contaminations ont baissé de plus de 77%. Des investissements importants ont pu être mobilisés auprès de ses partenaires, notamment le PEPFAR qui a financé plus d'1 milliard de dollars, et le Fonds mondial qui a aujourd'hui investi plus de 295 millions de dollars aux côtés de l'État. L'État a augmenté également ses financements au niveau de cette maladie et de la santé, ne serait-ce que pour la lutte contre le VIH/SIDA, c'est près de 150 millions de dollars, 15 millions de dollars plutôt, 15 millions de dollars qui sont donc consacrés chaque année pour permettre donc à l'État, là où donc on demande 15% de contrepartie dans les programmes, d'aller jusqu'à 20%. Et notre souhait, c'est donc de faire en sorte que progressivement, l'État puisse prendre la relève lorsque les partenaires vont se retirer dans la lutte. Nous pouvons dire, engagés avec le gouvernement et à sa tête le président de la République pour aller vers donc l'éradication donc du VIH/SIDA à l'horizon 2030. Mais nous avons bénéficié également de l'apport inestimable de la Première Dame, qui non seulement est engagée pour les actions sociales, elle a un hôpital elle-même, et elle a pris donc à son compte la lutte pour la transmission mère-enfant du VIH/SIDA. Grâce à son intervention aujourd'hui, cette transmission a été réduite de près de 44%. Et aujourd'hui, elle a rendu possible donc le traitement antirétroviral, des antirétroviraux au niveau pédiatrique, donc avec une surveillance accrue pour éviter les ruptures donc des produits au niveau donc de ces populations. Donc, je peux dire que le dispositif mis en place avec une implication, une participation large des populations des différentes couches, aujourd'hui nous donne la capacité donc de se renforcer. Parce que nous savons qu'aujourd'hui, grâce à nos partenaires, nous travaillons avec des ONG qui sont souvent des prestataires. Nous développons donc des agents de santé communautaire qui sont suivis par ces ONG. Mais nous sommes en train, grâce à la capacité donc renforcée grâce à la COVID, nous sommes en train de reprendre nous-mêmes à notre compte, à travers nos districts sanitaires, l'encadrement de ces agents de santé communautaire et renforcer notre direction de santé communautaire pour que les derniers kilomètres, les différents produits puissent arriver donc auprès de ces populations. En tout cas, l'accent sera mis sur tout. Ces derniers temps, on a constaté qu'un relâchement est fait au niveau des jeunes filles et des enfants, et nous sommes en train de travailler avec ma collègue de l'éducation pour renforcer la sensibilisation à ce niveau. En tout cas, je voudrais donc, pour terminer, dire merci à tous ces partenaires, dont l'UNAIDS, le Fonds mondial, le PEPFAR, pour leur contribution importante à la lutte contre le sida dans mon pays. Merci.
Thank you very much, Minister. And John, I have a follow-up question for you. But for that, I have to say I'm really sorry we're running late. If we can ask everyone to be brief in their responses. So, John, PEPFAR, the largest HIV program in the world, and a model agency of the US government with bipartisan support. I understand that State Department is now proposing, should Congress agree, to give you additional responsibilities to support the US engagement on pandemic preparedness and health security, while you maintain your core focus on ending AIDS. How can PEPFAR and the US government better support the needs in countries like Côte d'Ivoire to leverage their expertise in HIV and learn the lessons of COVID?
Yeah, you heard from multiple panelists. Chidi talked about other challenges that countries are facing with respect to emerging and re-emerging infections. The minister of heard of DRC here said, in quote, DRC is an epicenter for many outbreaks, and very uniquely mentioned the large number of people that measles kill children, and others have mentioned that. I think, as I said in my opening remarks, PEPFAR as a platform has strengthened health systems, public health systems, in a remarkable way. I think the time, I believe, has come where PEPFAR should elevate and leverage those platforms in supporting countries to ward off those emerging infections. That way they do not disrupt the HIV gains that we have. It is common knowledge that when we go to a country and there's an outbreak of Ebola, cholera, measles, the priority for that minister at that time is to get rid of that infection. Then you can go back to your HIV fight. So if we did not merge those two together and continue to have a siloed mindset, we will not protect the HIV gains. Absolutely not. COVID-19 taught us two lessons. One is that you can truly and effectively leverage the PEPFAR platforms to increase testing, to increase vaccination, and that was done effectively in many countries and other areas of IPC, infection prevention control. But it also told us that when these infections occur, and they're occurring more frequently, they disrupt HIV services in a significant way, remarkable way. So I think that conversation has to happen, and I'm pleased that the leadership of the Department of State under Secretary Blinken is looking into that very favorably.
Thank you, John. Minister, how are you leveraging international investments from, for example, PEPFAR and the Global Fund, to maintain and increase domestic funding for HIV in Rwanda? And as fiscal challenges continue to restrict your domestic fiscal space and resources for health, Have your domestic budget and health workers for HIV gotten larger or smaller?
Je vais parler en français, si ça ne me dérange pas. Bon, il est vrai que, d'abord, je vais commencer par remercier les organisateurs de cette conférence, de cette réunion, qui nous permet de pouvoir passer en revue l'apport des différents partenaires dans le cadre de la lutte contre le sida, PEPFAR, UNAIDS et les autres. La question que vous posez sur comment nous pouvons faire en sorte que les ressources disponibles du Fonds mondial, de PEPFAR, puissent servir de catalyseur aussi pour l'augmentation des ressources domestiques dans le cadre de la lutte contre le VIH. Elle est très fondamentale parce que récemment, il y a eu des réductions des financements du Fonds mondial de PEPFAR sur les 5 dernières années. C'était un appel à ce que mon pays et les autres pays, parce qu'on n'est pas les seuls, à pouvoir commencer à s'assumer dans le cadre de l'augmentation de ressources domestiques investies pour la lutte contre le VIH. Particulièrement pour le Rwanda, nous avons travaillé sur 2 axes. Le premier axe, c'est des réformes institutionnelles qui ont été conduites pour une gestion efficiente des ressources disponibles des partenaires et des ressources publiques dans le cadre de la lutte contre le VIH. Ces réformes institutionnelles ont amené mon pays à pouvoir créer des agences de mise en œuvre des programmes de santé, y compris le programme VIH, et d'autres programmes qui étaient financés par le Fonds mondial et le gouvernement américain, notamment des programmes pour la malaria et bien sûr le programme pour le VIH. La création de ce que certains qui sont ici connaissent, notamment l'agence Rwanda Biomedical Center, qui était une fusion des programmes verticaux, où il y avait, comment dirais-je, une multiplicité des unités de gestion qu'on pouvait fusionner en une seule unité de gestion des financements et donc faire des économies dans le cadre des ressources qui sont disponibles pour la lutte contre ces 3 maladies. Cela a été fait. Au lieu de continuer à avoir des programmes verticaux, VIH, TB, malaria et les autres, on a créé plutôt une seule agence pour pouvoir coordonner la lutte contre ces maladies-là. Je parlais des réformes institutionnelles. On a aussi créé une unité de gestion des financements de partenaires. L'unité de gestion qui gère tous les fonds de partenaires, bilatéraux, multilatéraux, et les fonds publics aussi, dans le cadre de ces 3 maladies. Encore une fois, une réforme pour une gestion efficiente des ressources. La 3e réforme, c'était la question des ressources humaines. Quand nous avons commencé la mise en place des programmes VIH, on a recruté du personnel contractuel dans ces centres de santé, hôpitaux, pour s'occuper des programmes VIH. On s'est rendu compte qu'on ne pouvait pas continuer avec cette dépendance en ressources humaines financées par des projets, et il fallait penser à les absorber au niveau du budget ordinaire. Et pour le faire, le gouvernement a fait ce qu'on appelle la rationalisation des ressources humaines dans le secteur de la santé. Au lieu d'avoir une structure dans un centre de santé ou un hôpital qui est typique et imposé à toutes les structures, il fallait plutôt, nous avons fait des analyses pour voir le volume de travail pour chaque structure et définir la structure de santé par rapport au volume du travail. Ainsi, des centres qui traitent le VIH, où il y a beaucoup de cas, à Kigali ou ailleurs, ces structures-là, parce qu'ils ont un volume important des patients qui viennent, elles devraient avoir un organigramme ajusté avec du personnel supplémentaire qui serait payé par le gouvernement. Et rassurez-vous que dès qu'on a mis en place ces structures, tout le personnel contractuel payé par le Fonds mondial, payé par PEPFAR, on a commencé une absorption progressive de ces contractuels pour les en faire des agents de l'État. Donc ça, c'est une réforme qui va aider d'ici la fin de 2025 à absorber le personnel projet payé par nos partenaires, et ainsi donc, au moins la question des ressources humaines, elle serait résolue. Enfin, une autre piste, c'était l'intégration des services. Au niveau des prestataires de soins, il n'était plus possible, après presque 20 ans de gestion des programmes VIH, avoir un programme étiqueté comme VIH avec du personnel identifié dans une structure, probablement portant même des uniformes différents des uniformes des autres personnels. Ce n'était pas tenable. Donc il fallait intégrer les services VIH dans l'ensemble des services rendus dans la structure de santé, pour en faire donc que nous puissions utiliser la même chaîne d'approvisionnement, qu'on puisse utiliser pratiquement cette intégration a été aussi une réforme et nous le faisions en pensant à la pérennisation des services financés par des partenaires. Et donc pour nous, nous disons l'existence du Fonds mondial et de PEPFAR a servi à ce que le gouvernement puisse faire sa part. Bien sûr qu'on n'a pas encore acheté les ARV, ça c'est clair. Mais pendant ce temps, le gouvernement a investi dans les infrastructures où ces ARV sont administrés. Il y a des hôpitaux qui ont été construits, il y a des centres de santé qui ont été construits. Le pays n'étant pas extensible, à un moment donné, on ne va pas continuer peut-être à construire de nouveaux centres de santé, hôpitaux, on va rénover ceux qui sont vieux, mais on va avoir des ressources qu'on peut affecter aussi à l'achat des médicaments subventionnés, et ainsi se préparer progressivement à prendre la relève de nos partenaires. Et pour terminer, l'implication du secteur privé. Je crois qu'à ce jour, il n'est pas normal que dans la certification de nos populations par rapport aux revenus, quelqu'un qui est dans la catégorie supérieure en termes d'income, de revenus, puisse avoir des ARV gratuitement comme un indigent qui est au coin et qui est un agent d'une banque, d'une assurance, d'une société multinationale, qui puisse avoir les ARV payés par de partenaires alors que la société peut prendre en charge. Donc nous avons une discussion ouverte avec Rwanda Social Security Board, qui est notre agence des mutuelles de santé, pour que progressivement on voit comment certains agents de la catégorie supérieure puissent carrément bénéficier les ARV sur financement, sur cofinancement de la caisse des maladies ou l'assurance maladie. Voilà des pistes sur lesquelles nous sommes engagés pour préparer une augmentation de la contribution intérieure pour ce qui est des financements qu'on reçoit de PEPFAR et de Global Fund et des autres, mais aussi pour que le budget ordinaire puisse progressivement prendre une bonne partie des dépenses aujourd'hui, espérant que ça va être une solution qui est pérenne. Merci.
Thank you very much, Daniel. We all have a lot to learn from Rwanda. Lois, we know you as a bold, strong HIV advocate who doesn't compromise. We've had a successful Global Fund replenishment. You have ongoing support from PEPFAR. You've heard about the stepping up from national governments. Do you think there are enough resources for HIV, and what are the resource gaps for communities?
Thank you. Thank you so much for the question. And first of all, I'd like to say it's really a great privilege and an honor to be here and being given the opportunity as a young woman to speak on such important issues that matters to me and the rest of the communities. Going back to your question, there isn't enough resources to really address the gaps. Why do I say so? We do have a lot of groundwork that needs to be done. We know that we have done so much in terms of providing treatment, making sure that communities have access to treatment across HIV, tuberculosis and malaria and beyond, and that has been massive. And I would like to say I'm also one of the product of an effective HIV programming. So really, really kudos to all the partners to making sure that there is continued access to treatment. I would like to say that there's still some gaps when we talk about strengthening families. We know that we haven't done a lot in terms of HIV management among children, adolescent girls, and young women. And when I talk about HIV management, we have to also look at issues to do with mental health, psychosocial support, viral load monitoring. These are really key issues that needs to be addressed beyond just providing treatment. And this has been really missing when it comes to community level engagement. And I also want to talk about issues related to evidence. There isn't much investment that has been done in terms of communities being able to come with the evidence on what really works for the community, so that partners and donors can really come up with interventions that really address the real needs that are happening within the communities. And one last thing that I want to talk about is CLM, community-led monitoring. We have seen that community-led monitoring really doesn't have an impact in informing the needs, what governments needs to do, where donors need to really focus on going forward for us to reach our target. And really community-led monitoring is there for civil society to assess, track, and monitor the health system program to see where the gaps are and better address the real issues that are happening within the community, and for improved quality service delivery. And this is where majority of the areas where we really need to focus. And this cannot be done if we don't have adequate funding. We know we have done a lot in terms of having access, free access to medicines, but we really need to focus more on HIV management at community level. We also need to focus on, community led monitoring as well, and strengthening families and community systems strengthening as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lois, and I implore government leaders here, and of course the donors, to listen very closely to your views. Please join me in thanking all the panelists on this panel. We have another panel to go, and we're running a little bit late, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
today. How do I get it on?
I sent him them.
Okay.
You didn't know I sent you a message.
And we also have the honor to welcome the Director of Public Health of Nigeria, Dr. Alex Oko, to this panel. Thank you. Oops. So the other ministers of health whom we have, Senator Lizzie Nkosi, Minister of Health of Eswatini, Dr. Tikoloti, Minister for Health from Botswana, and Dr. Joe Fala from South Africa. Peter Sands, my boss. From the Global Fund. And despite Peter and all of us working so hard for the last many months, we need to thank Peter especially for getting up today and coming. Thank you, Peter. Minister Nkosi, you have one of the highest HIV burdens in the world, but thanks to impressive focus and leadership, Eswatini has broken the trajectory of the epidemic and even reached epidemic control. What's the biggest obstacle you still face to accelerate the progress towards ending AIDS by 2030?
Thank you. Eswatini, I think, is one of those examples where we can look at how an epidemic like HIV can totally decimate a population. And then coming out of that, looking at the prevalence at the moment of about 27% of Emaswati living with HIV and AIDS, and looking where we've come from the last 20, 30 years almost of the pandemic to where we are now. We are looking at, in terms of achievements, we're looking at the decline of infections between 2010 till now of 64%, decline in HIV-related deaths of 53%, improvements in prevention of mother-to-child infection of 95%, and a very strong political commitment. In 1999, the Kingdom of Eswatini, the king declared HIV as an emergency. And since then, government then committed resources to ensuring that antiretrovirals would be there. This money is ring-fenced, no matter what happens, whether we had COVID or whatever, this amount of money was committed by government and continues to be so. So that is some of the things that have made our response actually work. And looking at this is something we know we could not have done on our own. This is the reality. That much as we're saying government has committed resources, there is no way we could have reached where we are without PEPFAR, without UNAIDS, without Global Fund, without so many other partners on the ground that had and made sure that we can get where we are now. I don't know if I'll be going beyond your question, but what we're observing now is that the epidemic seems to be taking a slightly different shift, isn't it? It is moving from being generalized to much more being micro epidemics, particularly impacting on young women, girls and young women, adolescent girls and young women. And some of the drivers of what we see now, we're looking at an increase in intergenerational transactional sex between the 15 to 24-year-old women with more affluent and richer men. We're looking at what has happened within COVID. We have seen an increase in teenage pregnancies, but this talks to the inequalities between men and women and the vulnerability of young girls. And we're looking at increased gender-based violence. So it means going forward, these are the specific challenges that we need to look at and look at other gaps. In 2019-2020, looking at the spectrum modeling, we reached the epidemic control of 95, but we've just done the third consecutive national AIDS surveillance in the country. And what we are seeing is highlighting some of the gaps that we need to look at. Amongst women, we can see that we've maintained the 95, 98, 97. But amongst men are so reluctant to seek help, and they are reluctant to go for testing. So at that level, we're at 92, 97, 95. So these are some of the challenges that we need to look at. But even though we'd had such strong, robust systems to manage HIV, we did not have those strengths on managing other pandemics that came along. So it is some of the lessons that we come up with. I can talk. I think I'm going beyond your question at this point. Thank you.
Minister, thank you very much, and thank you for highlighting the change in the epidemic in many countries and the absolute necessity to focus on the inequities and the drivers of the epidemic. Lois, where is she? There. Yeah. You have inspired many people with your story. You were born with HIV, and look at you now, healthy, bold, beautiful, and smart. What do you think is the biggest obstacle to ensure that every child with HIV is on treatment and no babies are born with HIV?
Thank you so much. I think that going forward, we need to make sure that they are community-based interventions that really speaks to the issues that children and adolescents are facing in terms of making sure that they start and stay on treatment. And like I have mentioned previously, that we know the impact of civil society in making sure that we address those gaps. If I take you back, in the beginning, we know that a lot of people were dying. I also witnessed and saw the death of my mother and my younger brother in the same week due to AIDS, and it was really a devastating experience for me. And at the age of 12, when I also got sick, and by that time I was staying with my paternal relatives, one of my aunt, and she didn't know what to do with me. She didn't know what to do, but the power of the civil society really, motivated her to take me for HIV testing. And it takes a lot for civil society to really convince the communities, to take, or should I say mothers or parents, to take their children for HIV testing, and for children to stay or to start on treatment because of the social and cultural norms that are happening, especially when we talk about stigma. A lot of people still, fear the issue of being judged because they are going for an HIV test because of how HIV started. And we haven't done justice in terms of creating awareness to the community on the new narrative of HIV. U equals to U, communities don't know, if I tell you. And this is where we really need to work hard and make sure that we support civil society organization to have an impact in terms of addressing the gaps among children and adolescents. Thank you.
Thank you, Lois. All I can say again is hear her words. Minister Koloti, Botswana has been recognized for having a model HIV response and also to have successfully managed COVID. How are you working to build on your experience of fighting HIV and COVID at the same time to leverage synergies for an integrated approach to HIV and pandemic preparedness?
Thank you, moderator. And let me take this opportunity to recognize the First Lady of the Republic of Botswana, Maitsu Mama Sisi. Moderator, I'm quite grateful for this opportunity to share with you, the story of Botswana, of how a country that was in the early 90s was believed to be on the verge of extinction from HIV and AIDS, to a country that was last year, December, celebrated with a Silver Tier Award from the WHO, a country that this year, in July, was celebrated to have surpassed the 95 target. That is something that would have not been possible without the political will and the political leadership, that emanates from the era of President Mugabe, who reached out to the rest of the world, for the help on HIV and AIDS. And thanks to the partners that came, we had Baylor that set up the first center in Botswana. We had PEPFAR. We had the Global Fund and many more other international, donors. I mean, that would have not been possible without them. And to a country that during COVID, in March 2020, we did not even have the capacity to test for COVID, to a country that in November discovered the Omicron, it shows you the political will. And that was during the era of President Masisi, who made COVID-19 his #1 developmental project. I mean, we stopped everything to just focus on COVID. And thanks to Botswana, thanks to our communities, because they had complete, total ownership. Everyone owned whatever that the leadership, put forward to them. And thanks to our resilient health systems as well, because, we anchored all of this in our primary health care, which is people-centered, which is also responsive, equitable, with a value for money. Without all that, we wouldn't have really reached the point where, currently we are one of the few countries in Africa that have achieved 71% vaccination rate on first dose, 64% total population fully vaccinated. These are all achievements where, all the hands were on the deck. Every other citizen living in Botswana made sure that they contribute, they become part of the solution. And, partners have really contributed a lot in terms of all this achievement. And we're looking forward to even strengthen our health systems more, to be a lot more responsive, with strengthening on diagnostics, surveillance, to make sure that we can also match the disease trajectory of the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Peter, for 20 years, we, the Global Fund, have been fighting the three biggest diseases, and then we added COVID to the portfolio. How have Global Fund given support to countries and communities to respond to the three diseases and COVID in ways that do not create silos, but leverage synergies and provide a holistic approach to health? Very brief answer, please.
Don't worry about it. We can pick it up later. Thank you for that very easy to answer small question, Lady Rolls. Before I respond, though, people very kindly are sort of congratulating me on the results of yesterday's replenishment. But I want to kind of throw it back at you and say, this is an achievement of the entire broader partnership. Two of the most effective advocates for the Global Fund have been Lois and John. And their voices have actually been much more effective than mine. So it is a huge achievement. I just have two asks of the people in this room. One is and this week is a great opportunity to say thank you. Thank you to the ministers within the implementing countries, because implementing countries stepped up in an enormously impressive way this time. In fact, the minister from DRC who just left they had a clash yesterday, and they were unable to make their announcement. He was just confirming to me that they will be pledging an increased pledge to the Global Fund, but all of 6 million. I wasn't sure whether I could disclose the amount, but
I've said it now, so
you've said it now. I didn't say it. But also to the development or finance ministers or foreign ministers or prime ministers of some of the big donor countries. The reality is if you're a politician in Japan or Germany or Canada, for example, you don't win any votes at home by giving more money to the Global Fund. I mean, that, I'm afraid, is the harsh reality of it. It's not good for their political careers to do that. They do it because they believe it's the right thing to do. And so if you get an opportunity to say to any of them, we know you're doing it for the right reasons. Thank you. This is the moment to do so. Because sometimes they say to us, ooh, I'm not sure, people really appreciate how difficult it is for us to do this. So that's just one comment. Now, to your small question, and I know I've got to give a very short answer. Look, one of the great strengths of the HIV/AIDS response as a siloed, focused, exceptional response was its relentless focus on outcomes, on actually saving lives and reducing infections. And that was the advantage of being focused. The disadvantage, of course, was that it was focused. And one of the things we learned in the COVID response and through C19RM, we found ourselves supporting countries on a much broader set of capacities and infrastructure, responding simultaneously to COVID itself and to the knock-on impacts on HIV, TB, and malaria, is that we've got to get smart at doing investments. And I know many of our partners in countries we're all moving in this direction, making investments that can serve multiple needs at once. So we're fighting multiple diseases and also making people better protected from future threats. But in going broader, not losing that relentless focus on, we're not actually interested, well, we are interested, but only as an intermediate input into how many labs and things. What we're really ultimately interested in, what a difference it makes to people's lives, the lives we saved, the better health we deliver. So we need to keep that sharp focus on outcomes while we simultaneously take a broader approach, more oriented towards a broad set of health system capabilities that can serve across multiple diseases. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Dr. Fala, South Africa has the largest HIV epidemic. You have the largest HIV treatment program in the world and cutting-edge HIV prevention and community empowerment programs. What are South Africa's lessons on how to use the HIV response to accelerate the pace of all of your progress across the health sector, while ensuring that key populations and adolescent girls and young women get the priority support and attention they deserve?
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, and greetings to all leadership here and colleagues. Indeed, we do have the biggest challenge, and our big challenge now is, with the loss of momentum as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, how to pick that up. We made a lot of strides over the last 10 to 12 years. If you trace where we were, just around 2008, 2009, high mortality rate, low coverage, and we've been able to reduce the incidence of HIV and AIDS by just under 50%, around 45%. And with the coverage of treatment currently just over 5.2 million. Our biggest challenge is making sure that we can slow down the incidence of new infections, as other colleagues have mentioned, especially amongst young people. And that's why a few months ago, we launched our HIV and AIDS intervention strategy focusing on young people. Going forward, our big focus is to make sure that we can integrate our programs, because it's one thing, I mean, which we have learned through the COVID-19 pandemic, that it's, you know, when you're under pressure, of course, you can't avoid the silo focus. COVID-19 was decimating, you know, large numbers of people at the fast rate, but now that that has reduced, our key task is integration. As you've said, making sure that learning from the leadership and agreeing with the colleagues who have spoken earlier on, leadership, political leadership, not just at the top, but mobilizing leaders at regional level, at local level, business leaders, traditional leaders, professionals. One of the key things which we also learned is making sure that your healthcare workers, from the community health workers, but also your health, your professionals are also on board, and through that we believe that if we can retain that momentum of what we learned through the COVID-19, we can be able to strengthen our health platform, because at the end, what is going to sustain us, it's a very strong health system, the entire health platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerald. And again, a perfect follow-on to final comment from you, Winnie. UNAIDS, of course, maintains its focus on HIV, but like Global Fund, you strongly engaged on COVID. I know you recently visited the MNRA hub in South Africa, and you're fearlessly pushing for a vaccine for HIV. What are the most precious lessons of COVID to strengthen the HIV response and get us back on track to end AIDS?
Thank you for that question. What was positive in the COVID response that we should bring and should give us hope and bring into the HIV response, but also what was wrong that we don't want to happen in the HIV response? I think the fact that governments came together and pulled together, found a lot of money that could move towards getting a vaccine in 1 year. That the scientists, backed with money, were able to get a product ready to stop the COVID ravaging the world. I think that was great, and it tells us that, yeah, if we build that momentum too and push, money can be found maybe to get a cure for HIV. Breakthroughs in science, that if we push hard and get the money behind the scientists, we could get amazing breakthroughs. So it makes me hopeful. But of course, some lives are, we live in an unequal world, inequality. Some lives matter more than others to governments. This is easily becoming a disease of poor Black and brown people and slowly getting forgotten. So we have to fight, build more alliances, and keep people living with HIV, people at risk of HIV are as important as anybody else. So we have to keep fighting there. But the fact that money could be found in a difficult fiscally constrained world tells us that it's possible, gives us hope. We must fight on. The second thing we learned, and we always knew, and scares me actually, is that of course the system of rewarding biomedical innovations fails us at every stage, has failed us. It failed us with HIV, but people living with HIV fought and made a little dent in that system, so that today, whether you are a poor woman in Uganda or you are a man working here in New York, you have the same life-saving treatment for HIV. That was a breakthrough by people living with HIV. It is there for us. But sadly, such a breakthrough wasn't made in the case of COVID. And now what we are seeing is that that same really unjust system of rewarding biomedical products is kicking in to hurt us again. Because today we have long-acting injectables for prevention. You get a shot in the arm and for 2 months, you're safe. And this is available here in New York, but it isn't available for people running away from criminal laws who need that even more than where their same-sex relations are legal. So where we need the tools, we don't have them there because science is rewarded by the market. Governments don't step in, don't try to regulate. So we need to fight now. We are pushing VIV, which has this technology. We've made the first bit of success by getting them to agree to bring their technology in the medicine patents pool so that some generics can be made. We are getting there, but very slowly because the system is rigged against ordinary people. So those are two examples I can give of what's right that we can take forward and fight for, and what's wrong that we must try to correct. So I fought on COVID because I knew that even with the science, everybody won't be reached unless we have a fair system of distribution. We still don't have it. And it's hurting us in the HIV response. We keep fighting. On the other hand, the good things are that money can be found. And money has been found here at the Global Fund replenishment. We didn't get the 18 billion, but we're close. So it tells you, and in a difficult environment, government stepped up to 30% more. It tells you that we can't find the money. We need to fight for the political commitment. And Global Fund fought so well. So let's keep fighting. It's all about pressure. It's all about people mobilizing to get what they need. Thank you.
Thank you, Winnie, for reminding us we need to keep up the fight. Before we close, I'm going to ask the Director of Public Health to speak. She has an important message for us from President Buhari. And then Stephanie, sorry to put you on the spot. Stephanie Seydou, Ambassador for Global Health from France, if you'd like to make some closing reflections. Thank you.
Excellencies, Your Excellency, the First Lady of Botswana, ladies and gentlemen, in response to the call for political leadership in the HIV response, I am privileged to be reading the statement of His Excellency, President Muhammadu Buhari. I must first, on behalf of the people and government of Nigeria, express appreciation of the consistent support by the United States government and the Joint United Nations Program on HIV, UNAIDS, in driving our shared agenda to end AIDS by 2030. I wish to specifically thank US Global AIDS Coordinator, Ambassador Nkenga Song, and UNAIDS Executive Director, Ms. Benima, for convening this important event right after a successful Global Fund 7's replenishment. My country, under my watch, has enjoyed the goodwill and generosity of the United States government, the Presidential Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, PEPFAR, the Global Fund, the UNAIDS Secretariat, and their co-sponsors, through whom Nigeria recorded remarkable progress in reducing the HIV burden and contributing to 1.8 million people living with HIV on life-saving antiretroviral treatment. To keep the momentum and in response to the 2021 political declaration on HIV, my government held national dialogues on the global AIDS strategy, paving the way for its adoption into our national HIV strategic plan, the framework that will drive actions towards the achievement of the 2025 global HIV targets and keep Nigeria on track to end AIDS by 2030. Nigeria is committed to the partnership with the Global Fund, committing substantial sums over the years since its inception, and pledging $12 million at the 6th replenishment held in 2019. In the same spirit, Nigeria attended the 7th replenishment held here in New York and pledged $13.2 million to fight for what counts and to save 20 million lives. I take the opportunity to recognize the partnerships with PEPFAR, Global Fund, and other developmental partners through whom Nigeria's pandemic preparedness and emergency response system and structures are being strengthened, building on the rapid and generous support for our emergency response to COVID-19. I commend the use of these platforms and investments for continued strengthening of health systems and for pandemic preparedness, including through revamping of primary health care as the main vehicle to universal health coverage. The recently enacted National Health Insurance Act set up the National Health Insurance Authority, through which HIV, TB, and malaria services will be integrated for efficiency and sustainability. The HIV Trust Fund, launched in February 2022, is geared to accelerate elimination of mother-to-child HIV transmission and to reduce the burden of pediatric HIV infections in Nigeria. Towards this end, I approve that Nigeria, in solidarity with the rest of the world and as a demonstration of our commitment, convene African leaders and our international partners in Abuja in November to launch the Global Alliance to End Pediatric AIDS by 2025. Through this alliance, Nigeria will join other heads of states and governments across the continent to ensure sustained high-level political engagement to achieve our goals. We have continued to honor the commitment we made at the high-level side event at the 72nd session of the UN General Assembly in September 2017 to place 50,000 additional Nigerians living with HIV every year in treatment annually using Nigerian resources. In addition, the waiver granted exceptionally for the use of competitive international mechanisms for procurement of antiretroviral medicines continues to enable more Nigerians to be placed on life-saving antiretroviral treatment. In closing, I reiterate the government of Nigeria's full commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals and other international and regional initiatives towards ending AIDS by 2030 and to addressing current and future health emergencies. I count on the partnership of all to strengthen country leadership and ownership at all levels for a sustainable HIV response. I thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Director, and please convey our thanks also to President Buhari. Stephanie.
Well, I'll be very short, and I am so glad for the invitation. Thank you very much. I represent the government of France. I think at this stage, it's a really good thing that we can today congratulate ourselves and celebrate the success of the 7th replenishment under extraordinary US leadership. And it's fitting that we can say this here today in this PEPFAR UNAIDS event. But I want to commend, like Peter said, the whole partnership, obviously the advocates, the communities, Ms. Bianima, the technical partners, clearly, and who have spoken so well of the importance of the communities for this, and naturally the Secretariat, which has done an incredible job under Peter Sand's leadership, and which I think we all recognize. So I think it's a really amazing moment to have this event today, that we are still reading in the emotion and the energy of yesterday's incredible event. And it's also a time when I believe there's a great opportunity with the challenges we have, because this isn't over and the fight must go on. Great opportunity in alignment, which I have heard, and I have listened very carefully to Ambassador Kangasong's interventions since he took over the leadership of PEPFAR, and I think you heard our president yesterday. There is a new strategy in the Global Fund, which I believe all partners, UNAIDS, PEPFAR, and others can really understand and follow quite clearly. The way forward, we know it. It's that which has been evidenced by the ministers who spoke so well today, and that is appropriation, country ownership, country co-investment, durability, and taking this forward in the integrated people-centered approach, which will guarantee success eventually. So we were celebrating yesterday, tomorrow morning, but the work starts also today and this afternoon. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Seydoux. And just some final comments from John and Winnie. John?
Just my final comment, maybe I will stand up and launch our PEPFAR strategic direction. We're calling it, again, after listening to all of you, we're calling it Reimagining PEPFAR's Strategic Direction, Fulfilling America's Promise to End HIV/AIDS Pandemic by the year 2030. Essentially, the video of this, the 5 pillars that I just spoke on, which is the priority populations, health systems and security, sustaining the pandemic, and partnerships and leading with science, underpinned by data leadership, community leadership, and innovation. So thank you all. We'll be circulating this to all of you. Just a word of thanks to everyone that we listened to, and you were very honest with us. You asked us to be bold. That word kept coming over and over. Be bold. It's about 20 years that PEPFAR was established, and I believe we were bold. We listened to you. So here we go. As Stephanie said, the time for implementation starts right now. Peter, I look forward to working with you. Winnie, I look forward to working with you. All the ministers, you'll be seeing me in the countries selling this plan. We'll be doing a roadshow and selling this plan to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. And Winnie?
Not much to add, just to add my voice to John's, that thank you all for coming. It's all about partnerships. It's about a movement moving in one direction, energizing each other. So thank you all, ministers and First Lady and all of you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Winnie. And I extend thanks from all of us to you, John, Winnie, all the distinguished ministers who spoke, and our panelists, Peter, Lois, and Dr. Moeti. The fight to end AIDS goes on. It requires life-saving investments and stronger health systems. But while funding is critical, we all know it's political leadership at all levels, that has the power to really drive change and end AIDS. Our speakers gave practical examples. They gave us ripples of hope. Let's fight on for what counts. Thank you. And before we go, could I please ask First Lady and our other 2 ministers to join the panel for a photo? Yes, to come on the stage.